The storms of life can at times take a real toll on our mental and emotional health. Today we're chatting with a woman who has an amazing story of healing and how God helped her after she was viciously gang raped about 10 years ago. Her name is Colette Aikema, Associate Speaker with Faith Beyond Belief, an organization whose mission it is to help Christians become effective in sharing Christ in everyday conversations. Colette, welcome to BCN.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm just honored to be here, so thank you.
Oh, it's our pleasure having you on board. Colette, describe first of all for our viewers who you were before you were being raped.
I was just a regular, well, maybe, I think we have to go really far back. I think that the issue of sexuality was put on my heart when I was younger. I was abused when I was a child. And I also think so as much as that was also for evil, I also think that that just ignited in me a awareness of sexuality and the fact that there's something that we as Christians often don't talk about. And I grew up in a believing family, an amazing, loving home. I was raised Christian, and I know what I believe, and I know the God who loves me. And that was, so, but it was always kind of a bit of a, there was an undercurrent of this in my life. I was dealing with compulsive masturbation, and then, of course, I was raped when I was in high school, in junior high. So it was really, it changed everything. And then yet at the same time, this was something that was already there was something there. There was a part of me that wanted to have this conversation. There was a part of me that had been ignited in this. And all of, just like everything, I only learned from all these things. And now I'm able to just talk about what happened and realize that, God's grace is more.
Describe what actually led to that fateful day when you were raped.
It was just a regular day. Just I was just a young girl. And you know, it's hard to talk about the specifics of that day, Hal. Um, but it was a place where I should have been safe, and I was with people where I should have been safe. And I was not I was not being kept safe that day. And it was just terrible realizing that I could be in a safe community and be, you know, I think I grew up knowing that, knowing the scriptures, knowing that we all have gone astray. We all like sheep have gone astray, and there's no one who does good, not even one. And yet you believe that people just won't do certain things, right? And then I had to learn that even Christians themselves will do depraved things. And that was very, very difficult because it completely shattered it shattered my spirituality and my faith in my community. And yet, um, God was able to keep me safe at that time, afterward. So
Those people who attacked you, were they ever captured and charged?
no, they were not.
Wow. Is it still an open investigation or is it a cold case with the police?
It's a cold case with the police, because it ended up being a historic investigation because I was unable to come forward with my testimony and with my experience until just a few years ago. And by then, too much time had already passed. And when the perpetrators were, in being investigated, they refused to have lie detector tests, and then refused basically all communication. And then the investigation went dead from there.
Let me ask you something, Colette. It's been about 10 years now. Have you been able to forgive those who did this horrifying thing to you?
Yes, I have. I have been able to forgive them. And my body and my mind do not forget. And even my heart does not forget. But my life is full of brokenness as well. And like I said, we are all equal under God. We've all sinned equally. And so, yes, I have forgiven them.
Colette, how did this really affect your relationships with men and women?
I think it just kind of blew up what was already an issue for me. So I was already, just like any regular girl, I was going through going through the end of puberty, and so just like any other any other girl, I was jittery around boys. I became aroused at awkward times. I wondered if I was gay because I there were girls that I really loved. I wondered if I was bi. I wondered if maybe I was actually a boy. And so all these things were on my mind. But uh, the rape, and then the especially what's really important for people to understand is that because of what happened, the trauma, I also became addicted to pornography. And it wasn't just, people tend to say, well, girls, it's different for girls. Girls are not addicted to hardcore pornography. Well, yeah, they are. When we Google something, we find the exact same thing as men. We find the exact same thing as children and as seniors, right? So we need to realize that the internet's not discretionary that way. And as much as people say that women are not visually wired, we also are visually stimulated, some women more than others, and we're not all the same. And so for me, pornography became a real problem. I really struggled with pornography addiction and sexual addiction because of what happened, which 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 led to all kinds of problems, right? I mean, I because of the porn addiction, I what happened was it's something we call a hypersexualized outlook on life. So what that means is that I just saw sexuality everywhere. I would just be walking down the road and I would see people crossing the street toward me, and immediately when my mind would go, I bet they're going to go have sex, completely out of context. And I wasn't raised that way. It's important to understand that that was not how I. That's not how I was. I didn't think anybody else experienced life that way. So I felt very, very outside. I felt very alone.
So let's talk about how God really helped, first of all, with your healing after being attacked and raped, and secondly, through this porn addiction.
Right. Well, what's really amazing is that I think the one thing that we have to remember is that human sexuality is inconsistent. And human sexuality is subject to change and subject to trauma and subject to brain chemistry and genetics and all these things. But Christian sexuality and moral sexuality is not dependent on those things. And so for me, what became huge was realizing that I was able to see the trauma, I was able to see my addiction, I was able to see um, the fallout, all the consequences. I was able to see that through the lens of a Christian worldview. And because of that, I was able to be, God reminded me that there are constants, that there are realities, that no matter what happens to my body, no matter what happens in my life, no matter what emotions I have or thoughts I have, these are things that do not change. Objective truths about me, about other people, about the life that God has given me, those are things that do not change. And that completely changed everything, because then it was no longer dependent on how I felt and on how I perceived things to be. I could read the scriptures and trust that reality is what it is, regardless of how I feel.
Now, you spoke earlier about maybe some sexual confusion. You thought maybe you were bi at one point in time. Did you receive counseling to help you seek out your true identity when it comes to your sexuality?
Yes, I did. So after my husband and I got married, we actually, of course, which is really inevitable when there's sexual trauma and sexual addiction. We started having some problems, and so I went to counseling, and he went to counseling, and it was really what was also amazing was that I was at the university at the time. I was taking a university course on sex addiction. And as I was taking this course, I went into it just thinking, wow, this is fascinating. This is really cool. And then because I enjoyed that, I thought it was interesting to talk about what makes sex addiction addiction and what makes other sexuality normal or healthy. Right. So we talked about that and we had those discussions. And then as time went on and as I was going through counseling, I realized, wait a minute, it makes sense that I am understanding this language because this is a problem that I have. And I didn't even realize it until then. And so there was a real moment for me. If you don't mind my sharing, I share it um, not to be graphic, but I share it because I want people to understand how horrible this moment can be. But I know many people who have come to this moment, and that there's hope for you. There's healing. There can be that turnaround because there's a beautiful plan of sexuality that we can follow. And so what happened for me was that I was just using pornography like any other day, and what I was watching turned out to be one girl with several men. And as I was watching, I could see that she was trying to push one of them away and starting to say no. And as I was watching, I realized there is something wrong with me. There is something wrong. I need help. And that was really the moment that just God just changed everything. I picked up the phone, I called a trusted friend, and I said, I need to tell you something. And that's what changed everything.
You know, Colette, you really hit the nail on the head there. I've spoken to other people who are addicted to drugs, alcohol, sex, and they say you have to hit your rock bottom and realize that you need help. You can't have other people say to you, you have a problem, you know, pointing fingers at you. The walls go up, right? People become defensive, say, I don't have a problem, I'm fine, you know? So you have to reach that rock bottom before you finally realize that, yes, I finally need help. And it's amazing that you did that. Outside of the counseling and you reached out to your friend, and of course you're praying to our Heavenly Father, what else really helped you overcome the addiction?
What really helped me overcome the addiction was the support group that I was able to start. So there was a contact that I had in Lethbridge, a man who had already set up a Christian support group for men who were dealing with sex addiction and porn addiction. And so when I got into contact with him, I asked him, is there one for women? And he said, well, no, but you should start one. So I started one and I sat alone in a room waiting for people to join me for a year. And it didn't really take off. And then suddenly somebody contacted me and said, you know, you need to come and speak to this group of young women. And when we started talking, we were all like, oh, me too, me too. You know, I can't believe you're saying the words that I have always felt. You know, we were sharing stories where we were just speaking each other's language, and it was just unreal. And so we started a support group where we were just praying for each other and helping each other to live out our sexuality the way that we believe we should based on our worldview. And so that's what was really, you know, what I think has been so hard for me in being in Lethbridge in the last few months is knowing that our city, along with so many other cities, have banned the kind of counseling that I went through. And because it was, you know, unfortunately, we think that the type of counseling that comes to, you know, where we talk about sexuality and issues of gender, we think that we have to make sure that we protect LGBTQ people, and we should. And that's why we need to be really careful that we define things, because I've had the therapy that has now been banned, but I have specifically asked for it because it helped me reduce my unwanted sexual attractions and unwanted sexual behavior. And because of that, it is now defined as being illegal. And that's something we need to speak up more. Women like me, people like me, we need to speak up and say, this is counseling that I went to. It was not torture. It was a good thing. And I need to be free to choose the counseling that I went to, because just because something illegal is done to me, does that mean that it should be illegal for me to seek help?
Colette, what advice do you have for those who may be going through confusing times like you experienced, especially when it comes to sex and gender?
I think what's really important for us to understand is that we've been getting one dimension of an idea about sexuality. And so I've been doing some research into some of the sex education that we get in our community of Lethbridge when it comes to these topics, some of the organizations that provide sex education. And this is where we learn about sexuality. Unfortunately, the sex education that we receive and that youth receive is unfortunately it's not holistic in the fact that it doesn't include spiritual aspects. And so what happens is that people like myself, our sexuality gets conflicted with other things, and we don't know where to go. And we need to know that there are other options. And so it's really important, especially that the Christian community, that the church community step up and say, there's a Christian worldview, Christian view of sexuality that offers you hope and healing. And it goes far beyond any kind of fleeting sexual identity.
You talked about some of the therapy that's available now for women. You know, it's been around for men for a very long time, especially the programs. How about today? Are there still great support programs for women today addicted to porn?
I would say I think if a woman reached out to me now compared to 5 years ago, I think it's possible that there might be a few more resources, a few more books. But to be honest, Hal, it has not taken off as it should. You know, men are getting the help that they need, but there's no the support group for women in Lethbridge is no longer running because there was nobody else who was able to step up and take over. There's not many groups of them, even across Canada, even in the United States. They're there, but you really have to look for them. And in our community, especially in our small community, people feel like there's no help. And that's why I'm so eager to tell people that there is help. And organizations like Faith Beyond Belief really can show you that there's more. There really is hope.
I was thinking maybe, yeah, you should take the lead and take the charge, and you're doing that already with Faith Beyond Belief. Colette Aikema, Associate Speaker with Faith Beyond Belief, thanks so much for your powerful story today and for joining me.
Thank you.